Welcome to Steps Forward with Ricky, a weekly walking podcast designed to help you take steps forward in your life and your day. Happy Monday. Guess who did not feel like podcasting today? This girl. Maybe you don't feel like listening to the podcast today. Maybe you don't feel like going on a walk with the podcast today. But guess what? I showed up, so you're going to show up, and we're going to show up together. If this is your first time tuning in, you're probably like, what the hell is this person talking about? Am I supposed to be walking? Yes, you are. And we talk about real shit on this podcast. So I sort of just start the podcast however I feel like it. But as a reminder, I do always start it with telling you that you must be walking as you're listening to this. Okay? Okay. I'll give you a second to get your shoes on, grab your water. My lips are so chapped, so I'm going to drink some water immediately. Fun fact, I don't know if it's fun, it's just a fact. If your lips are really chapped, it could mean you're dehydrated. I know, every day you learn something new, huh? Woo! So yeah, I did not feel like recording this podcast, and here I am recording this podcast. I've always feel like that's important for me to say because I know that everyone just, we have all this stuff that we got to do or that we should do and making the right decisions and taking these steps. And, sometimes they're just exhausting to take. And I don't always feel like podcasting. Just like I don't always feel like going for a walk or creating videos or doing a lot of different things. I don't always feel like it, And that's something that I've really learned in this journey the last 5 months, especially from walking away from weed, is that it doesn't really matter what you always feel like. It's like, just do it. Just take the step forward and just make it happen because your feelings will come and go and they will always pass. And if you live your life based on how you feel at every moment, you'll never get anything done. You'll never make a decision. You'll never walk away from something. You'll never take a step forward because if you're so dependent on all of your feelings at every second. How many feelings do we have a day? We can't give in to every feeling that we feel. We should listen to ourselves. We should listen to our intuition. We should be connected to our gut. But some feelings, like feeling anxious or feeling unmotivated or just feeling low energy, those can pass by simply taking an action. I'm taking off my jacket. If you're not watching this, it doesn't really matter. But if you are watching this, I guess you'll just see me taking your jacket off. Sorry. So here I am showing up for myself and for you because showing up is how you grow up. And we can show up for ourselves in so many different ways. We can show up by doing the laundry. We can show up by making the bed. We can show up by not getting high. We can show up by following through on something. So just pick one thing. I want you to pick one thing to show up for today. Just one. Maybe it's this walk. Maybe it's not smoking today. Maybe it's calling that person back. Maybe it's posting that thing on Instagram or TikTok. Just pick one thing that I want you to show up today for. Despite and no matter how you feel. Okay? Okay. I had a therapist appointment the other day. I haven't had a therapist appointment in so long. I do it virtually. And that was one of the biggest things that helped me move through my journey after I walked away from weed. I got a therapist right away because I knew that I was going to have so many emotions and so many different things and thoughts going through my head. I also knew that I had a lot of trauma stuck in my body. Trauma lives in your body. If we feel achy or our chest is heavy or just certain parts of our body feel certain ways when someone says something triggering. Have you ever noticed that if someone says something to you, I don't like your jacket. Okay, this is a silly example. I don't like your jacket, Sarah. Who's Sarah? Anyways. And then Sarah has this immediate reaction, maybe not verbally, but physically, right? Her chest feels tight or she feels all of a sudden like sick in her stomach, right? These are emotions that live in your body. It's a real thing. People often talk about the thoughts in your head, and that's really important. But the most important thing is to deal with what you feel in your body as well. Where do you feel anxious? Is it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your heart? Because that's where the pain and the trauma is living. And that's where it's a really good idea for you not just to pay attention to your thoughts, but pay attention to your body when you're thinking your thoughts. That was a game changer for me. When I started to identify where I felt certain things in my body, it was easier for me to understand where the trauma lived in my body. And I met with my therapist and we were chit-chatting. We haven't talked since December before I left for my road trip. And she was like, I'm so proud of you. She's like, you seem so much calmer. And that's so funny to me because so many people have said that to me. Obviously not in the sense of like, I'm not energetic. Like clearly I'm a little out there and I'm very energetic and I have a lot of energy and I move fast. But like internally, I'm calmer. I'm not as reactive. And it's so wonderful when people say that to me because they're not saying you can't be energetic, you can't be this. They're just saying there's a calmness about you now, a peacefulness about you now. And if I didn't walk away from weed and I didn't have the courage to change certain things in my life and to face myself, I couldn't get to that calmness because that peacefulness and that calmness was in my body underneath all of the bullshit. But I couldn't get to it because I was getting high, because I was staying in things for too long, because I was anxious, because I didn't love myself. And so when you do the work, and the work never ends, so let's not paint me a pretty picture and be like, this person has it all figured out, like, not interested in that. Super relatable because we're all human beings. And if you think that your work is done when you've done the work, you have a lot more work to do. But I've done certain work, like walking away from weed was like the first step. And I knew that after that, there were going to be a million other steps I had to take because you don't just get rid of the thing and then that's it. You got to do the work underneath the thing that you were using. So that's why I got a therapist right away. And it's okay if you can't get a therapist right now. Maybe you can't afford one. Maybe it's just not where you're at. That's okay. But if you can't have a therapist, I still want you to recognize that you still need to understand your feelings, the feelings in your head, the feelings in your body, the feelings that are going to come up when you make a decision to walk away from something, whether that's a habit, a pattern, a thought, a belief, a person, a place, a thing, marijuana. You have to be aware of what's happening underneath the thing that you're using. And a lot of people talk about self-love and self-care and all that stuff. And I'm all for it. I really am. I'm not like self-care is not a word that I use often. I don't think it's like very fitting to my personality, but I think taking care of yourself is a good thing. But let me just tell you something. When you go through heartbreak or grief, or you're mourning something, or you walking away from something, or you're overcoming an addiction, you don't just put a goddamn face mask on and go to the sauna and go to the gym and like, that's it. Self-care, no. Before self-care comes self-awareness. And before self-care comes feeling your feelings, the thing we're all afraid to do. Getting a haircut and doing yoga is really great. I recommend both of them if you need a haircut. Yoga is really great. Yoga is a great way to get in touch with your body. Working out, moving, all these simple habits are great. But the most important thing for you to do is sometimes just to feel it. Just to feel it. I mean, that was my thing. When I actually, I got my therapist and I walked away from weed and I was super anxious the first 5 weeks. And I would go on these long walks and I would just cry all the time. I would cry. There were some points where I would take a pillow and I would scream into it. I mean, I had never done that before. I didn't even know that I was so angry. I thought I was just sad. I couldn't get to the other emotions. Whether you're getting high or you're overeating or you're just doing something that's constantly destructive, you can't get to the other emotions because you can't even get past the thing that you're using. I remember this one day, I was on a walk. It was like maybe November 1st. That just like popped into my head. It was definitely November, the first week of November. And I was staying at my lake house at the time because my ex-boyfriend and I had just broken up like 5 weeks before. And we lived together in Detroit. So I was at my lake house and, I was really committed to my process of overcoming my addiction with marijuana. I was committed to therapy. I was committed to healing myself. So I was okay with being at this house on the lake, even though it was kind of secluded. I accepted the fact that this was going to be a part of my healing journey. And I went on a walk. And this was the first walk that I took without listening to music or a podcast or being on my phone. I took my phone with me, but I just walked. I put one foot in front of the other. I wasn't high. I wasn't distracted. I was just there. And I cried. I remember I literally turned into this alley, maybe not an alley. I lived in this beautiful neighborhood. I turned the street and it was beautiful out. It was like the mist, the middle of fall or the end of it. And I found this little wall and I sat I leaned my back to it and I sat there and I held myself and I cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I remember till this day what it felt like to just cry like that. I mean, I was so angry. I was so angry at myself, at my ex-boyfriend, at weed. I was so angry at my mom who died when I was 13 years old. I'm like, holy shit, I'm fucking angry at a person who's not even alive. She didn't choose to die. And that was the first time in my life I just allowed myself to feel with no judgment, with no fear. I wasn't scared I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't scared that I was going to be overwhelmed. I wasn't scared of anything anymore because the scariest thing in the whole world to me was never being able to live without marijuana. That was so scary to me. And I was about a month in that process. And so everything else I could do. Everything else I could handle. And I cried and I screamed and I have 100 pictures of it because obviously I document everything if you know me by now. And I was in pain. And I kept walking. And I wanted to put a podcast on and I wanted to put music on and I wanted to do all of these different things. And I was like, you don't do anything, Ricky. You're going to sit here or you're going to go for a walk and you're going to cry and you're going to cry and you're going to feel something because you are allowed to feel it. And then you're going to move forward from it. 2 hours later, I was sitting outside having a bonfire. And guess what I felt? Sad. Guess what else I felt? Proud. So proud of myself. When you allow yourself to feel something and you realize you're not going to die from it, you're allowed to feel proud of yourself for letting the moment pass, for knowing that it is just a moment. You're allowed to feel proud of yourself for not getting high. In fact, you should. Every single time you do something and you wanted to get high instead and you didn't, you better feel proud of yourself. Also, just really quickly, how good am I doing? I'm not even swearing. I don't think I've sworn once. I mean, anyone can change. It's true transformation. I don't know. That story always stands out to me because that story was really a moment for me because I was so scared to be with myself. I was so scared to be without my ex-boyfriend. That was a really tough breakup for me. I was scared to be without getting high. And every walk that I took was a reminder that I could do it. And I felt really proud of myself for that. I know it's not an easy journey. I know you might be listening to this and you're like, how do I do it, Ricky? You're so far ahead. I'm so far behind. And you're not. You're really not. You got to commit to the process and you got to do it when you're ready. And for me, I got to a place where being in pain was just so painful for me and I wanted to feel something different. And I knew that it would be uncomfortable and it would be all these different things, but I knew that feeling my feelings was the only way to move forward. The self-care shit was going to come second. The self-awareness shit was going to come first. So you are allowed to be scared. But just because you're scared doesn't mean you should stay where you're at. You know what you should do in the face of fear? Face it. Lean into it. Walk into it. Jump into it. Dance into it. Talk into it. I don't give a shit what you do. Go towards it. Fear is just a feeling. Getting high is just a thing that you do. It's not who you are. You don't have to stay where you're at. You don't have to stay in that relationship. You don't have to stay in that job. You don't have to stay in a weight if you're not comfortable in it. You don't have to stay high. But you got to make a move. And you got to remember that the move that you're making is going to be scary, but it's a hell of a lot better than staying where you're at. Okay? Okay. I am grateful. I look back at my journey and I'm like, wow, my biggest and most shameful secret, the thing that I could never tell anybody, has been my greatest freaking gift. I always thought my mom dying was the gift of my life. Okay, sounds weird the way I'm saying it. I realize that. What I mean is I always thought like my mom dying, like that was my like purpose, was like you talk about grief and your mom dying. And like I always shared my story with my loss was such a big part of my life, but I never really wanted to talk about every 5 seconds. It didn't feel like super natural to me. Like I didn't want to coach people on that. That's not what I wanted to do. But this, helping people take steps forward in their life, my podcast, helping people walk away from weed, being able to create things that help people change their life. This is it. This is pain to purpose. So you might be at a place in your life right now, and you don't know why this is happening to you. It's not happening to you. That's why, because it's happening for you. And you're strong enough and you're brave enough to figure out why. But you don't get to the why unless you make a move. Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. So show up today. Pick one thing to show up for. And then, even when you're scared, even when you think the feeling is going to overwhelm you, it's going to take over you, I want you to remember that it's not. Because it's just a feeling, and a feeling always passes. You've made it this far. Maybe your life isn't so great right now and you're like, great, I made it this far, but my life hasn't even been that great. That's okay. There's plenty of time to change it. That's the beautiful thing about the journey, is that you're the author of it. And some chapters will suck and you'll have to do some editing, but you keep writing. You don't stop just because you haven't made it yet. You keep going. You show up. You do what I do. You take one small step forward at a time, and you jump into the face of fear so that you can face yourself, so that you can face the world, so that the world can finally see you for who you really are. I hope you had a great walk. I love you. You know that. I'm here for you. I'm grateful. I'm proud. And wherever you're at in your journey, I'm supportive. Every person deserves a new and a fresh start. And you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to give yourself that gift. You don't have to stay in the pain or the suffering, but you do have to allow yourself to feel it, to move forward from it. And I swear it's not that scary. It's like a little scary, but it's nothing you can't handle. Okay? You guys are awesome. I'll see you next Monday.